Welcome to today's Explainer. You know, we usually spend our time diving deep into the crushing darkness of the ocean abyss to uncover lost vessels. But today, we're switching gears. We're stepping away from those deep-sea wrecks to investigate a ship that acts as a permanent, living monument right near the surface. We're talking about the USS Arizona. It's a vessel that's honestly so much more than just a shipwreck. She's known as the Silent Sentinel. And to truly grasp why she remains exactly where she fell, we've got to unpack the terrifying physics of her destruction and the strict legal framework that keeps her completely untouched.
Okay, let's dive right into this by looking at a genuinely haunting reality. She has been bleeding for over 80 years. Literally every single day, small drops of oil rise from her rusted hull all the way up to the surface of Pearl Harbor. It's this incredibly surreal phenomenon that survivors of that day often call the Black Tears of the Arizona. Because unlike wrecks swallowed by the miles-deep abyss, the Arizona is right there. She's just below the surface, actively interacting with the world above, all while holding the remains of over 1,000 men who never made it out.
Section 1. The Black Tears, a ship that still bleeds.
So, to understand this, we need to look at a massive number. 1.5 million. That is the sheer volume of fuel, measured in gallons, that the Arizona was carrying on that fateful morning of December 7, 1941. I mean, really think about the scale of that for a second. She wasn't just a warship, she was essentially a floating fuel reserve preparing for active duty. Those black tears we see today, over 8 decades later, they are the slow, relentless release of that massive 1.5 million gallon reservoir that is still trapped beneath the waves.
Moving on to Section 2, a 1 in a million hit, the horrifying speed of destruction.
Now, what's really striking here is the sheer contrast in how ships go down. Most naval battles, they're long, drawn-out affairs. Take the legendary Bismarck, for example. Today, she sits 15,700 feet down in the deep ocean, but it took nearly 2 hours of intense bombardment and something like 3,000 shells to finally sink her. The Arizona, on the other hand, sits just barely below the surface, and her end came with a speed that is genuinely terrifying. It wasn't some prolonged battering, it was almost instantaneous.
And the cause of that lightning-fast destruction came from above. During the attack on Pearl Harbor, a Japanese high-altitude bomber dropped a heavily modified armor-piercing shell weighing exactly 1,760 pounds. This wasn't just your standard explosive, folks. It was a heavy, highly specialized weapon designed to punch straight through the thickest steel a battleship could possibly offer. And tragically for the Arizona, it found the absolute worst possible target.
Military experts called this a 1 in a million hit. Here's exactly how it went down, step by step. First, that massive shell pierced the deck right near the forward turrets. Second, it somehow found its way directly into the ship's black powder magazine and detonated. The resulting internal explosion was so extraordinarily violent that it did the unthinkable. It literally lifted the entire 30,000-ton battleship completely out of the water. Just pause and imagine the horrifying physics required to lift 30,000 tons of solid steel into the air. It's almost unimaginable.
Because of that catastrophic detonation, the ship was just gone in mere seconds. It happened so incredibly fast that there was virtually no time to evacuate. So, the devastating human cost here is that she took 1,177 of her crew members down with her to the shallow bottom of the harbor.
Which brings us to Section 3. Why not salvage her? The mystery in shallow water.
With the ship sitting so tantalizingly close to the surface, unlike those wrecks hidden in the crushing darkness of the abyss, this is the most logical question we have to ask. If a ship like the Bismarck is 3 miles down, totally beyond the reach of conventional salvage, we absolutely get why it stays there. But the Arizona is literally right there. You can actually see her outlines from the surface on a clear day. So why leave a 30,000-ton battleship sitting in the middle of a major active harbor?
Well, the answer to this mystery is actually twofold. It relies heavily on both the physical state of the ship itself and some incredibly strict international rules. Basically, it comes down to extreme technical fragility on one hand and absolute legal and ethical protections on the other. Let's break both of these down so we can really get the complete picture.
First, let's look at the technical reason. We have to examine the exact mechanism of her sinking. See, the Bismarck was actively flooded by its own crew before it sank. It filled with water, which equalized the pressure, allowing it to remain remarkably intact even 3 miles down in the deep. But the Arizona, she suffered a massive, catastrophic internal explosion while her hull was still completely full of air. Because of that violent outward force, her structural integrity isn't just slightly damaged, it is entirely shattered. Attempting to lift or salvage her today would almost certainly result in the fragile remains just crumbling to pieces. But here's the thing. Even if we had the technical magic to raise her safely, we absolutely wouldn't.
And that leads perfectly into Section 4, designated as a war grave, protected by international law.
You see, the USS Arizona is a formally designated war grave. Under international law, this definition is absolutely vital. It makes the site a sacred tomb that forever belongs to its respective nation. Going inside, entering her lower decks, or trying to recover artifacts isn't just frowned upon, it is legally and ethically considered grave robbing. This strict designation ensures that no one will ever enter her lower decks again, permanently protecting the remains of the men who never made it out. And this concept isn't just an American thing, it's practically universal. Just as the German government protects the Bismarck, designating it as a seaman's burial site that has to be profoundly respected, the United States views the Arizona with that exact same level of reverence and strict legal boundaries. These aren't just sunken pieces of metal to us. They are recognized globally as final resting places for the fallen. So she physically can't be moved, and she legally cannot be touched. This brings us to our final part, Section 5, the Silent Sentinel's Future, the Science of Deterioration. The ultimate fate of any shipwreck depends entirely on its environment. Deep-sea wrecks last an incredibly long time because the water way down there is freezing cold and severely lacks the biological organisms that eat away at wood and steel. But the Arizona, she is in a completely different world. She sits in shallow, warm, and highly oxygen-rich water. As environmental science tells us, this creates the absolute perfect breeding ground for marine life and rapid corrosion, meaning the Arizona is actively and constantly deteriorating. Let's trace this timeline out. The ship sank on December 7th, 1941. Now, for over 80 years, she has been continuously bleeding oil into the harbor. And because of the speed of her deterioration in that warm Hawaiian water, experts estimate she will continue to leak for roughly another 50 to 100 years. That's when those massive internal tanks will likely finally collapse or just empty out completely. It's a very finite, incredibly haunting physical reminder of her ongoing presence right before our eyes. Though her active career as a commissioned warship was far longer than the Bismarck's incredibly short 8-day run, the Arizona's true legacy has lasted nearly a century as a silent sentinel. She remains a silent witness to a morning that forever changed the course of world history, preserved in place by her fragile state and fiercely protected by international law, history, and the profound respect of everyone who visits her. So, as we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with a question to really ponder. In 50 to 100 years, when the very last of those black tears fall and the rusted steel finally collapses into the harbor floor, will the fading of the physical ship change how we remember the day that lives in infamy? Let me know your thoughts on this one, and as always, keep searching for the forgotten stories beneath the surface.